Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Cash Physical Therapy Headquarters podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about what you should be expecting your first year in business as a cash physical therapist. Ben, good morning, man.
Morning. How you doing?
How you feeling?
Doing good. Yourself?
I'm doing good, man. I'm really excited. This is an episode that people really need to hear because there's so many experts and gurus that are out there making it sound so easy to launch and grow your own cash physical therapy practice. And although it is easier than people tend to think, there's some very important details that are being left out that are leaving people not knowing what to expect and then getting completely blindsided and then doubting themselves. And so I think this is going to be a really fun episode to talk about because I don't think there's a lot of light being shed on what it really takes and what people should be expecting their first year in business. So I'm feeling good.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions and expectations weren't
right.
It didn't add up for my first year. I'm definitely blindsided by a lot of things. So
what was the biggest thing that blindsided you your first year in business? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was more so not actually starting out that I got blindsided. It was more so like around the ninth or 10th month when I actually had a full caseload. It was full time. Everybody painted the picture of this, lifestyle business. So I was like, oh, I get to 20 patients a week, and I'm gonna be, I only have to see 20 patients a week, and maybe 5 or 10 hours outside of that, and I can do whatever I want, and have that finally that time freedom. Not the case. At 20, 25 patients, I was working like 60, 80 hours, and so I think that's the biggest misconception that I think a lot of people in space are selling is this lifestyle business. There's nothing lifestyle about it at that point. So that was the biggest kind of slap in the face and like blindsidedness that I got was actually in the 9th or 10th month because I finally achieved what I wanted to and thought it was going to be so great. And it was actually one of the toughest times in business because I wasn't prepared for it.
Yeah. Everyone does really talk about that first like 10K month, just getting to 5 figures a month. And they think that all their problems are going to be solved. And the coaches and the marketing gurus in the space with their crazy like guarantees and promises have really left a lot of, it was a real disservice to a lot of people because they think that all of their problems are over when they get there. And then they're living the dream at that point when it's really like, that's really just the prerequisite to having a sustainable and healthy business. But it is, as you said, like that's a really dangerous place to be. So I think a good way to start out this episode is let's talk about the different stages that you're going to go through as a cash physical therapist. So I'll start with phase 1, then you can do phase 2, and then we'll alternate. So number 1 is really, really exciting. It's the scariest decision to make that you're going to start this because you're wondering, how is this going to impact my job? I'm going to spend all my free time doing this until I get it figured out. And once you make the decision, it is one of the best feelings ever. And normally you're going to get this initial surge of people contacting you, your friends, your family. They're going to support you. And past patients from your previous job are going to follow you. And you're going to start out saying like, oh my God, this is so great. And you're going to find that you have more time than you've ever had before. You're going to be making pretty decent money, but you're going to find out that phases out in about 3 months. And then you're going to really hit a slow point and you're going to be stuck at, typically like 5 to 8 patients a month. And you're going to start to wonder like, do I have what it takes to actually do this? Because the reality is starting to set in that you have to learn all of these new skills. You have to learn lead acquisition. You have to learn conversions. You have to learn how to retain your patients. You have to learn how to communicate your value to people to offset the lifetime of belief that has been instilled in them that they need to be using their insurance and that going the traditional route is going to get them the absolute best outcome they can. And your prospects, they don't have the context that you have when you go through DPT school. They don't have the context you had seeing what working in a traditional setting is like. And you can't just give them all that context. You don't have, an entire hour or days or weeks to be able to talk them through all the reasons why you're great. You have to learn how to do it in 15 minutes. And it's a really difficult skill. And a lot of people really get surprised when just building it doesn't mean that people are going to come. Just because you have a product that is superior, that is great, and you're a world-class clinician doesn't mean that people are going to believe you. And so the first stage is really, really exciting. But then you start to transition into the reality where all of your fears start to really show themselves. All of your financial struggles are really going to start to be exacerbated. All of your insecurities are going to start to get shown, and it's an incredibly vulnerable place to be in. And that is what I'd consider the first no man's land, as we call it, like the first stage of like, no one can get you through this except you, because it's a complete mental game that you have to get over. Going through that vulnerability, that risk of failure, the ability to sit in the discomfort of this isn't working. And in your mind, it feels like everyone is watching you fail, when in reality, no one's actually thinking about that at all. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And to go back to phase one a little bit, one of the best feelings, especially if you start a cash-based practice, is that first time somebody pays you for straight cash, or just you are able to charge somebody without using insurance for the first time, and somebody tells you that you're worth, $200 an hour. It's a really good feeling. So that goes into the excitement phase. But yeah, I think you said phase two, kind of like an oh shit moment. And because like you said, friends and family are really supportive at the beginning, and then that phases out, and like you said, people aren't thinking as much about your business and your success as you think, and so then that starts fizzling out, and then it feels kind of alienating because that's not there, and life goes on. Everybody goes about their days, and it's kind of an afterthought, and you're kind of got to sit in that discomfort and like, oh shit, it's out, right? So I think it's a scary phase, and it's the first of many punches in the face that you get as a business owner. So it's kind of like a welcome to the club.
Yep, it's your first, well, not the complete first, the first experience of like callousing your mind. I think it's David Goggins that uses that terminology a lot, is making the leap to actually start your practice. And if you've done that, kudos to you. It is a very scary and hard decision for a lot of people, and you're incredibly brave for being able to take that step, and you should give yourself credit for that. But then the next thing that really calluses your mind, that starts to turn you and shape you into the version of yourself you have to be successful in this, is to get through that first no man's land of like, this isn't working. And you really have to dig deep and believe in yourself that you do have what it takes, and that this is all only temporary, and that you're going to get through it no matter what. And so that's kind of stage two. Stage three is usually after you get some sort of mentorship, you find some sort of community, some other people who are on the same life path as you, who give you encouragement, who teach you some strategies and some systems that you didn't have before, that allow you to start gaining a little bit more traction and momentum, where you're acquiring more patients and you're getting busier and busier. Again, very, very exciting stage to be in, because you're validated. Your crazy decision to do this, your professors who told you it would never work, your friends who thought you were nuts, who said that you couldn't start your own practice, you got to work in the industry for a decade longer before you're able to do that, or your spouse who said that this is absolutely crazy, why take the risk? That's when you're going to start to feel validated, like I effing told you so, and it feels really good. But as that continues, you start to reach that next stage that is inevitable for all business owners to get into, which is when they become a slave to the machine that they built. You are now an employee of your own making, where you're starting to get close to that 8 to 10 to 15K a month in your practice. But now you're not only doing all of the fulfillment, all of the treatment, you're responsible for maintaining lead acquisition and all of the sales. You're doing all of the notes and the admin work. And now you're doing 4 different jobs, plus being a parent or a partner and trying to find time for yourself and your hobbies. And you're realizing that, my God, I'm working harder than I ever have. I'm more stressed than I've ever been. And, you might be making good money, but it doesn't feel like you expected it to feel when you start making that kind of money.
Yeah. I really tell people that if you really want to have time freedom, you have time and financial freedom, you have to have the mindset that I'm going to scale. Because at that point of 20, 25 patients, and you're doing everything else, you can expect to work at least 50 to 60 hours, if not more, to do that. And my hourly rate was less at that point than it was when I was working for somebody else. Yeah, I was making more overall, but I was working so much harder and so many more hours that I calculate my hourly rate. I was making less. I'd be better off just doing PRN elsewhere. And yeah, you might be working 50 to 60 hours, but when you have a business, your mindset, you're always on. Like you're always having to be on. Even when you're not working, you're still going to find yourself not present in certain situations. Better off just working for somebody else, in my opinion, than do the solo practitioner route, because at least you can turn your mind off when you're off the clock.
Yep.
So that's
and the solo practitioner route can absolutely work. I've seen it work. We had one of our clients, Dr. Lacey, who's a public health therapist. She only works 3 days a week, but she's making really good money because she ran the math. She understands her numbers as a business owner, and she knew in order to make this amount of money and work only this amount of days and treat this many patients each week and still have time for her two newborn or her two very young kids. I think one of them's a newborn, one's like a toddler at this point. But instead of trying to cram her schedule and take up all of her time, what she did is she just skyrocketed her rates because she knew she was really, really good at what she did. And her word of mouth was really, really good. So she didn't have to focus too much on like a ton of like other marketing. It was, for the most part, self-sustaining. And she does love her life. She has a beautiful family. She seems, really, really happy. But the problem is that you start to realize what we've seen happen so consistently is that when people are a solo practitioner and they have no intention of ever building a team, that wears off in about 6 to 12 months. When you realize that, one, you're at a really, really risky, in a really risky position, because every single time you get sick, every single time one of your kids gets sick, anytime that you have to take off for family, life, whatever might come up, your income now stops. And at any moment, your family can be without that second or primary income. And that's a really, really dangerous place to be. And the other side of that is that people realize it's like, this is great, but I don't want to work this hard for the next 20, 30 years of my life, even the next 5 years of my life. Like, I want to be able to build a business that serves me rather than me serving it. And so what we find so consistently is once people finally hit their dream of that 10 to 15K a month, they realize that, one, they're in a really dangerous position. They don't have the time freedom that they actually want to have, and that they're actually sabotaging their own success by remaining solo, because just by bringing on another PT into the mix and taking on that risk and taking on that responsibility, they could double their income and drastically reduce how much they're actually working, and then start to only focus on the parts of business that they're really passionate about, whether that's patient care, whether that's the business mechanics of it and becoming an operator, which a lot of people really, really love to do, or it's mentoring the PTs that they bring in and taking on their new employees as their students and as their new customers, where now they live and they exist to create the best work environment and the best conditions for PTs to want to work and live for, to save them from the jobs and the stress that they started their practice to get away from. And so there's not that many people. We've worked with over 500 cash practices at this point. I don't think we've had maybe we've had 2 people who continued to want to stay a solo clinician longer than 6 months.
Yeah, it's not a fun place to be, in my opinion. But everybody's memory is a little different. But it was one of the actually probably the toughest part of business for me was that phase. One of the most fun was bringing on that first PT, and first front desk, and then you're able to get your treatment down to 10 or less hours. That's a really fun place to be. Now you're able to mentor, you're able to get your time back, really formulate and build the business on how you want to fit your lifestyle. Some will want to still see like maybe 15 patients. Some will want to see 10. Some, like for me, I didn't want to see any patients. I enjoyed the business aspect of it even more. I had that chance, that opportunity to decrease my patient care all the way down to 0 because I had another PT. So bringing on that first PT really gives you that flexibility to get it so your business works for you.
Right. We just had someone post in the group actually. And sorry if my keyboard was a little loud there, but we just had someone post in our Cash Physical Therapy Headquarters Facebook community. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Ever find yourself stuck in the clinic more than you'd like and not enough time spent growing your business? What did you do to shift that focus and get the clinic working for you? And this is exactly what we're talking about. This is where you might find yourself right now, where everything is relying on you. You're just trapped in the business and you are serving the business rather than it serving you. And so let's talk a little bit about, like, from day one, how can our listeners who are considering starting a cash practice start teed up for success by designing a business that's going to serve them versus the other way around? Anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, first formulate what that looks like for you, right? And know that's probably going to evolve as well. Like so many, like just by being able to listen to this episode and have that foreshadowing that I didn't have, whereas like my goal is just get to 25 patients full time and I would be good to go. Know that is actually not the right end goal. Yeah. So it also, you got to formulate and be able to foreshadow and get around other people that are ahead of you so you know what it's going to be like, so you can plan for it. So first you got to plan for it, right? And decide what does that look like for you. All right. But second of all is also what worked for me when I wanted to start getting my time back. And this is something I started actually doing around this about a year and a half in, 2 years in, was writing down literally everything that I was doing for a week, wrote every single task down. And then I created trainings, recorded myself completing that task. And then what you can do is, if you have a team, or when you're thinking about bringing on a team and deciding who to hire, go through that task list and be like, who's part of my team that I can hand some of these tasks off to? And if I can't hand it off to a current team member, that means you need to hire for that position. Yeah. Right. So look where you're spending most of your time, and that'll help you also determine if you want to bring on a physical therapist or if you want to bring on an admin, depending on where you get most enjoyment out of different tasks and which ones you do not. So that's how to go about getting some of your time back and getting that business to work for you. But curious on how you went about it, Jordan.
No, I mean, that's really good. I think I'll just add a little bit of steps in there. Like, before you start your practice, ask yourself, what is it that you truly want in your life? Think about yourself at 80 years old. You maybe have a year or a few months or weeks to live. What is it that you would be proud of? What is it that you want to have accomplished? What are the fears that you would be proud that you overcame? And make sure it's like, is starting a business really what it is that you want to do? Or are you just escaping a job that you don't enjoy? Because if it's purely job satisfaction that's causing you to want to start your practice, but you don't want to build an asset, an enterprise that can create jobs and to change the perspective of the populace of what physical therapy can actually be and really drive the profession forward and become a leader of the profession. If that's not what you want, that's perfectly fine. That's not for everybody. That's a tremendous amount of responsibility and stress to put on yourself. You have to be a special kind of crazy to want to do that, because you have to conquer so many of your own internal demons in order to make that happen. If you're just trying to escape a job, find another cash practice to go and work for. Find a new cash practice startup that's in town, because more than likely they are dying to find someone who they can help offload some of their treatment to, where you're going to be able to treat the types of patients you've always wanted to work with, where you're going to get paid a good salary. And you're going to have the work-life balance that you've always wanted to have as a physical therapist, but you're not going to have all of the extra burden and stress on top of that. Just having the label of being an entrepreneur isn't enough to justify the gauntlet and the crucible that you have to go through in order to be successful in it long term. And so if that's not what you want, I would recommend working at a cash practice until you know for sure that you want to build something that is going to last decades and provide for your family. And if you're not thinking long term like that, then you shouldn't start, because you need to have a vision when you start your practice of what it is you're truly trying to build, because you have to know how much you want to treat, how much you want to make. And once you know what those things are and what kind of life you want to have, then you can start shaping what your practice is going to look like, how much you're going to charge, what your packages are going to look like, who it is you're going to treat. But you have to start with the absolute end in mind, and really decide for yourself, like, is this actually what I want? And then if it is, design your practice around it. Don't just charge low rates. That is a false belief that a lot of people have, where they think that, hey, I'm going to be cheap because that's going to get more people in the door. First of all, it's not. It's just as easy to sell a $100 thing as it is to sell a $200 thing or even a $2,000 thing. And if you're priced as the cheapest, nobody expects you to be the best. But if you're the best, no one expects you to be the cheapest. And if you start out your practice charging low rates because it feels more comfortable to you, it's what you would pay, what you're going to attract are people who only want to pay a low dollar amount of things. And that's going to start to shape your beliefs and your decisions inside your business. And you're going to get tricked into thinking that no one would pay $200 a session. Like none of my current patients right now would ever pay that. And you're right, because you attracted people who only want to pay $100 or $150. You would attract an entirely different kind of buyer when you're charging the premium rates because they're perceiving you as the best. You're attracting people who want the best versus someone who just wants it cheap. And it's a completely different population of people. And so when you're starting out, if you decide to go this route, don't try to be a commodity. Otherwise, you're going to get treated as one, and everyone's going to make decisions based off of convenience and price. If you want to be the best, and you want to eventually be able to attract and retain the best staff, and you want to have a life where you're not always worried about where your next dollar is going to come from or where your next patient's going to come from, you need to start out charging what it is you actually need to have that kind of life and practice that you want to have. Because if you build a whole practice around the wrong business that doesn't create your life, it's so much harder to turn that around and transition into that next level of business where you are a premium and you are positioned as the best.
Yeah, it's. I think it's really important to begin with end in mind, because if you're charging like $130, you're not going to be able to bring somebody on. Like it's just simple math here. You're not going to be able to find, especially if you want the best of the best PTs. They're not going to be settling for, at that point. Do the quick math. You probably have to be paying somebody like $55,000, $60,000 for it to make sense at $130 per session. So yeah, you just need to make sure that you're charging enough from the get-go. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to bring on and retain high quality staff.
Right. And so when you're just starting out, the main things let's talk about like the main skills and things that people need to focus on in order to find success right away. Because everyone, in my opinion, starts with the wrong thing. Tell me, like, what do you think are the most important skill sets that a new cash physical therapy side hustle or practice owner should focus on developing?
Go with attributes, and these are things that are sometimes a little bit harder to develop and take time. But I would say if I had to pick, somebody asked us in a Facebook group, what is the number one trait that you think is most important to be successful in business? I think the number one trait is resiliency. That's, if I had to pick one, that's it. So being able to just go in and be resilient from the get-go is really important. And part of being able to be resilient is to kind of know what to kind of expect, so it doesn't hurt so much when you get hit in the face, right? So if I had to pick like an attribute, it'd probably be resiliency. But from a skill set, the number one thing is sales.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's the thing too. That's easier to develop too. Some people are just naturally more resilient than others. Sales is something that you can really develop much more quickly than the attribute of resiliency, in my opinion. Yeah. But because when it comes to sales, you have to, by being proficient at sales, now you can network appropriately in your community, which generates new patients. Then you get new patients, you need to be able to sell to those patients, right, and get the commitment there. So if I had to pick one skill set, it'd be sales for me. But yeah, curious what attribute and skill set you think is.
100% agree with you on the sales front. And I think there's some really good stuff that we can talk about on that. But I want to talk about resilience a little bit. My word is fortitude. They're the same thing, but fortitude just sounds more badass. So I like that one. So let's talk about like how to build that. Like, where does resilience and fortitude actually come from? They come from momentum and being able to make the right decisions on a day-to-day basis that is going to create progress, that is going to give you the validation you need to offset the setbacks that you're inevitably going to have with people telling you no, people treating you like you don't actually exist and they're ignoring you, they're ghosting you, they're not giving you the time of day. And so in order to build resilience and to create momentum in your practice, you have to really get a good understanding of how do you stack micro wins on a day-to-day basis so that every single day you are making progress and that you are getting better. And so everyone should understand when they're getting into business that there's only 5 functions of a business. There's lead acquisition, lead nurturing, conversions, fulfillment, and retention. Conversions is the number one thing that you need to learn first. Because no matter how many leads you get, no matter how many phone calls you get, if you don't know how to convey your value and to build the gap between where someone is and where they want to go and outline their alternative options and be able to have a conversation where the prospect is able to rule those alternatives out themselves versus you telling them, then you're not going to get anywhere. And so I think a lot of people focus so much on lead acquisition and they don't realize like how important it is to master sales, because in a traditional setting, you don't have to sell anything. All you have to do is sell them on you. And so that's why a lot of people, when they start out, they're just really friendly. They try to build a lot of personal rapport, because in a traditional setting, that's what gets people to commit to packages. They're just trying to find a provider that they want to spend time with. But in cash physical therapy, that is not the case. Okay. They obviously have to like you, but they also have to look to you as a leader who can tell them what to do and what not to do. And they have to believe and put their faith in you enough to put $2,000 on the line. So when people are just starting out, well, before we go into like the sales, any thoughts on like how else can people build momentum that creates the resilience that they need to have?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like proof on who you are, like who you say you are, and proof that that's actually true, right? So for me, like it was really important for me to exercise and work out every single day. That just make sure I was taking care of myself as well. And that just by making those small promises, making promises to yourself and keeping them, no matter what they are, it's going to help out with that resiliency. For me, it was like, hey, I need to make sure I'm getting my sleep. I'm promising myself that I'm getting 8 hours of sleep every night. I'm promising myself that I'm not going to let my fitness and workouts go to the wayside as I build this business. Promise kept, right? I'm going to eat healthy, and this is what it looks like of X, Y, and Z. Promise kept. And so when you keep those promises to yourself, you get that momentum that helps build up that resiliency that, you know, I am who I say I am, and I kept my promise to myself, and I made this promise to myself. I made these promises to myself. I'm making this next promise to myself, and I know I'm going to keep that promise to myself because of the historical track record I have of keeping promises to myself and knowing that, hey, I'm going to be able to figure this out. Is how I went about it. But
yes, that's so good. That reminded me, I just watched this Myron Golden video on YouTube. If you don't know who Myron Golden is, I highly recommend you go and check him out on YouTube, everyone who's listening. But he was talking about how most businesses fail and they fall into basically the commodity trap because all they do is the bare minimum of what they need to appear as if they're being successful. But the very, very few people are willing to develop the habits to fall into the superior minority. And all you have to do is make the decision that you do want to be in that superior minority and do the things that most people aren't willing to do. And that starts with, as Ben said, making commitments to yourself, sitting down and thinking, what characteristics and habits does the best version of myself have? The person who I want to be 20 years from now, what do they do on a day-to-day basis? What does their day look like? And start being that future version of yourself now. And that everyone should go read the book, Being Your Future Self Now. So good. But developing, like for me, I have a daily habit tracker where I track everything. I mean, everything to a detail that most people would be uncomfortable with. But it's making sure that you are getting sleep, making sure that you are reading every day, making sure that you're speaking positively to yourself. And when you're not, as we all do, you catch yourself and realize like we are not our thoughts and redirect that towards something more positive and productive for yourself. making sure you're drinking enough water, making sure you're eating well every day. And if you're taking care of yourself, your business is going to be just fine. Your resilience is going to build because you know as a person that you're getting better every single day and you're being true to yourself. And if you can love yourself and respect yourself, then it doesn't matter what anyone else does, because you know at the end of the day, you checked all these boxes and 99% of humankind is unwilling to do what you just did. And so I'm so glad that you said that, because you're so right. That is, aside from making incremental gains in your business by like really analyzing things and making progress, focusing on yourself is actually a better first step.
Yeah. That's saying it just begins with you. You've got to become the best version of yourself to be able to have the dream business that you want to.
Yeah. And that comes with another thing that is worth mentioning: imposter syndrome. You should have imposter syndrome. And if you're experiencing that right now, just know that that is 100% normal, and it's 100% a good thing, because it's a characteristic people have when they're striving to be a better version of themselves. And you experience imposter syndrome because you're acting and making decisions and portraying yourself as a future version of yourself that doesn't exist yet. And so you should feel imposter syndrome if you are progressing towards something that's greater than your current self. And so it's a completely normal thing. And if you don't have imposter syndrome, you're likely not thinking that big, or at least you're not making progress towards something grander. And so that is an inevitability. Just so you know, no matter what, like, you're going to feel imposter syndrome. I certainly feel it. Ben, I mean, you're an anomaly. But do you have imposter syndrome? I actually don't know if you ever feel like
that. Yeah. Every once in a while I do. But I think it will be minimal. It can be definitely minimized when you're keeping promises to yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's how I keep it as minimal as possible. Do I get that still? Absolutely. But I try my best to keep it as minimal, and that's what I find to be most successful in keeping that imposter syndrome down, is making promises and keeping those promises to myself.
100%. So we're running on out of time here for this podcast. So I want to leave everybody with one final note. And then, Ben, if you have one final word of advice for people who are in their first year of practice, how to find success, how to get out of their own way. We'll end with your sage wisdom. I'll leave everyone with something a little bit more tactical or more logistical. Like, when you're starting out, most people are grasping for straws because they don't know what to focus on first in their business. And so Ben and I already said the first thing that you got to focus on is becoming great at communicating your value, which doesn't mean becoming great at sales. It really just means being great at consulting and being willing to ask difficult questions and to challenge people's beliefs to guide them to the right answers. That's what a great mentor does. They don't, a great family member, someone who truly loves you, they don't allow you to make bad decisions. They call you out on your crap, and they guide you towards the path that is going to lead you to the outcome that is most desirable for both parties. And so the metric you're going for to know that you're doing a good job is you want to be able to convert 80%, at least 80% of your evals into plans of care or cash packages. That is the first metric that you need to really focus on optimizing, because until you can do that, everything else you work on in your business isn't going to change a thing. Okay. So solve for that first. The next metric you want to go for, once you're approaching that number or feel good about the progress you're making there, is your lead nurturing. The lead nurturing mechanism within your business. Of the leads and opportunities you're getting, how many of those are actually turning into sales conversations that you're actually having? So we got to learn how to, whenever we come in contact with someone, what are we doing to follow up with them? What are we doing to make sure that if they're not ready to buy right now, they're ready to buy 2-3 months away, so that we're maximizing every lead that does enter our world? And so we want 80% of phone calls to turn into paid booked evaluations. Okay, that's the second North Star metric you want to go for. Then the third one you want to focus on is your lead acquisition. We want to be able to acquire a paid evaluation for no more than $100. Now, if you can hit all three of those metrics, then you're really, really set up to scale. And so when you're just starting out, those are the only three metrics that you should optimize for and care about. And any marketer, guru, coach who's trying to sell you something that is outside the scope of those three mechanisms when you're just starting out, when they're not within KPI, is a distraction and you should avoid it at all costs. Those are the only 3 North Star metrics that you should be focused on year 1 in business until you're able to hit those. Then you can start focusing on scaling lead acquisition. Then you can start focusing on dialing in your fulfillment and designing a world-class patient experience. Then you can start focusing on your retention and optimizing your patient lifetime value, which you want to be at least $2,000. So those are the metrics you want to go for.
Yep, all that. And I'll end with more of a less tactical, which is not usual for us. It's usually the opposite.
100%. I knew when I was teeing it up that I was stealing it from you.
but no, it goes back to, like I said, resiliency. I think is the number 1 attribute that somebody needs to have to be successful. So I want to give some insight in another thing that can help with resiliency is find something bigger than yourself. I think that's really, really important, and figure out what your why is. So when you go through tough times, you can reflect on that why, and that will help you get through it. So for example, like envision, like I encourage everybody to create a vision board. And I personally don't really believe in manifestation, but I do believe that by creating a vision board, it helps. And you, by you being able to visualize that day in and day out and look at that, it helps your subconscious mind make decisions, because your brain makes subconscious decisions every day throughout the day. And by being able to have that target of that vision board, you are subconsciously going to make decisions to help you get towards that, whether you know it or not. You're going to also make conscious decisions to help you get there, but also subconscious decisions are going to be made subconsciously by having that vision board. So by being able to have that vision board, it helps immensely with, that should be related to your why, right? So when you, for example, like, do I really want to, 10 years from now when I have wife and kids, do I really want to have to look them in the eyes and say, I'm not the person that I needed to be for you guys because I wasn't willing to go through discomfort and do the things and then commit myself to the promises I made for myself. For me, whenever I'm having struggle, like getting myself low motivation to get something done, that's what I reflect on. And that it helps me do what I feel I need to do and know I should be doing in that moment to do that. And if it was just me trying to better myself, for me, wouldn't be able to do a lot of the stuff that I push myself through. But by being able to have, that future family in mind, it helps me get to do things that forces me to do things I otherwise wouldn't be able to do for myself. So figure out something bigger than just yourself.
100%. The vision board is so important. You need to put your goals and what it is you want to accomplish out there into the world and get it out of your head, so that it's more real to you. It's tangible. It's something that you actually placed into the world, and now you're measuring yourself against it. As long as it's in your head, you can't measure yourself against that goal, not in a productive way anyway. So you don't have to just put up a poster with a bunch of pictures on it. I know some people do that. For me, I do little things. Like I think in 2015, I wrote this check for $1 million to myself. Jim Carrey did this, and I did the same thing. Now we have a multi-million-dollar business, multiple multi-million-dollar businesses. And for this plaque that's behind me here, back in 2020, I drew it. I made a fake one and I put it on my wall and I looked at it every single day. When I wanted to hit $100,000 business, when I was only doing $20,000 or $100,000 a month business, when I was only doing $20,000 a month, I wrote, let's see if I have it. Oh, there it is. I wrote a little note to myself. $100,000 business without sacrificing lifestyle. And I wanted to do that by September 7th, 2021. I have accomplished every single one of those things. Now, manifestations for another podcast. And I'd love to debate and talk about that with you one time, Ben. That would be kind of fun. But whatever your goal is, write it down, put a date on it, because Ben's so right. Putting it down steers you in the right direction. It keeps you on track. And when things are really, really hard, it's going to pull you back to yourself, your true self, not your stressed out, anxious self that is really just your primal instincts kicking in and chemicals in your brain that you can turn off if you focus on it. Like, find out your why, write it down, make it tangible. And you're going to be able to get through a lot of the hard stuff.
Spot on.
Cool. Awesome, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Every single week, we're going live, teaching exactly what's working right now in cash physical therapy, sharing tactics,